Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Nancy Drew, Season 4, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So now the entire group knows about the curse between Nancy and Ace, because Ace ended up seeking comfort, needed moral support from Bess, and then upon Bess finding out about it, she needed moral support from everyone else, so they got filled in on what's going on. I even love George walking by like, oh, you guys are sitting together, but not like together. Good. Let's kind of like avoid all contact right now until we figure out this whole thing. And Nancy still hasn't told Ace everything that she experienced in that whole situation. She wants to keep him at a distance because, and she, kind of confirms it later on that she was afraid of her feelings, and it's understandable that it's like you're feeling all these feelings and they are kind of suffocating you because you're afraid of, I have to be on pins and needles. I always have to be wary of my feelings because if I even give in an inch, she's afraid that her feelings will go for a mile and she'll give in to him. And it's obviously she's afraid of losing Ace because it's too much. Like the price of this, she can't slip up because if she does, it could cost Ace his life. Once again, we don't know whether or not this curse is real or whether Temperance is just messing with Nancy because that fear could keep destroy any love she had for the rest of her life, or maybe it legitimately is because it could be like, hey, all these warning signs that's going off might not be real, but Nancy can't take that chance. She believes Temperance because Temperance is evil and vindictive enough to do something like that. So Nancy just doesn't even want to test that, But when it's all said and done, sadly, that in conjunction with the main overarching story of, we already kind of knew the water supply had been tainted, but it's not till this episode. In fact, it's not even till the last scene of the episode that George pieces it together about the water supply because she gave Abbott some water, and I'm like, it's a small town, but it is still a town, so there might have been various things popping up here and there, but no one had the connective tissue to kind of put things together, so some of people potentially acting out and acting a little differently won't be reported, because obviously the water has an adverse effects on people, because it affected Abbott a different way than it did Nancy, but not really. It's just, it affected them the same way, just the difference is Abbott was older and it took its toll on his body. And I figured because Nancy is younger, it probably didn't have. So it's not going to present itself the same way. So older people, yeah, we might have a similar situation to Abbott, but anyone else who's just drinking the water, maybe it's affecting different people at different rates. Because I'm sure it also comes down, well, Nancy had a little bit in her mouth and that ended up causing such a drastic change. Abbott was drinking it back. So, who knows? How much. Because like I said, whatever flew into Nancy's mouth, when the cup kind of got knocked over, which I almost feel like that's very poetic, considering it's almost like it's supposed to kind of represent how Nancy and Ace aren't in sync, because once again, Ace wants to know everything that Nancy's hiding from him, but she thinks right, what's the purpose of telling you something that won't change anything, it won't matter. But for him, it's yeah, but it must matter. It means something if you're willing to hide it from me. Because it's back to Nancy, afraid that, if she goes back there, she talks about it and makes it that much more real. And obviously the pain of what she went through, she doesn't want to share that because, once again, she's afraid. She opens up those gates when it comes to her feelings. She's afraid of them because her feelings for Ace it's essentially a bullet in a loaded. It's a loaded gun. So, and her feelings are the bullet. Either way, Abbott ended up having a heart attack. Obviously, George is working as a clerk for him, and so it's about figuring out what's up with this water. And then, we see Nancy kind of transform over to pretty quickly in the episode, turning into bro Nancy. I love how Bess put it. It's she's a cis female gender swapped with a gender swapping into the role of a very bro-y dude. I even love Ace being well, me, not all dudes are like that. Me and Ace aren't like that, but I do like that it is, and I'm not saying it is something that I think is going to be, I'm sure that's going to be a whole conversation and stuff there's way this show depicts toxic masculinity or whatever. It's well, I think it is that masculinity and the toxicity of, hey, I gotta be manly. I gotta like bury my feelings, and that usually takes on the form of like, rather than dealing with stuff, it's the same thing as bottling things up, and it's just like, right, masculine with a capital M, like you know, that's the kind of energy she's giving off. Nancy is, and like she's kind of a douchebag, but I love that like she's like I said, very broy, just in the form of a lady, and that the way she's talking about like, God, what was his name again? Is it Terrence? I forgot like the Glass's son. I remember that now I know their last name is Glass, but like Glass Jr. We'll call him that because I can't remember. I want to say his name is Terrence. He also the lobster dude. So she was at one point talking about like how hot he looks, and I was like, oh yeah, guys, you're 25% hotter when you smile or something like that, which is like, obviously, once again, it's like, yeah, there are dudes who will say stuff like that. Once again, I'm sure a lot of people, like, once again, it's playing into this toxic masculinity. Not every dude is like that, but I think there is this kind of thing as a guy where there is elements of that is true to some guys and not all guys, and then you have your extreme examples of like the extreme toxic masculinity of just being so like extreme bro type of dude, you know? So I think that was just kind of interesting. I even love at one point, it's like, oh, Ace, it's like, she's like, yeah, go to the filing room or whatever, like look up some info. And he's like, I'm a hacker. I do things with my fingers. She's like, don't tempt me or something like that. And then like George and Nick are almost like, wait, what? It's like, that felt like an innuendo there. I was like, I know I'm a pervy dude, but I'm like, I'm pretty sure that was meant to be what it was. And Ace is just like, she's like, yeah, go ahead, prove that you're worth more than just being eye candy, and kind of like raises her eyebrows and stuff. I was like, wow. I love when Ace goes talks to that lady. He's like, is he flirting with her? And then George is like, are you being possessive? And later on being like, yeah, I don't care who you're flirting with. It doesn't matter to me. It's not like you had a shot anyway. It's like, Jesus, Nancy. Because they talked about it too. It's like, right. It's just like she does end up with the interesting circumstances of, hey, I had the lust situation with the wedding dress. Now I've got this on top of the curse thing that's going on between me and Ace already. So I like that too, that it wasn't out of nowhere. Like she had her like interactions with the others. But what it really was, it's like, it's mainly between her and Ace, because what she's going through, what she's feeling, how she's treating Ace in particular is like, that was already a thing. And the black goo that's in the water ended up just exasperating what was already there and kind of heightening and complicating it even more. Because she was acting super aggressive even during the investigation, like making because this all connects to a file that Abbott was about to try and like open before he ended up passing out from his heart attack. And it was a case from a guy breaking into a woman's home like years and years ago, but the charges were kind of dropped, and the guy was able to kind of move on with his life. The young woman, she like tripped and fell and hit her head on a curb like in 96, but she's got these constant migraines, and she kind of blamed herself because she's thinking like, oh, I was drinking too much. I made a stupid decision to walk home alone. And how that, I wasn't expecting that story to turn out the way it did. And as we kind of learned more and more upon investigating, finding out that there's a memory altering situation going on, which now I'm wondering if that's what's happening here. Like, has all of, maybe this is done on purpose. Maybe this was meant to be used on one person, but now like I'm all over the place. I apologize. Get your thoughts straight, Marco. Jesus. My thing is, maybe the black ooze was meant for one person, but rather than letting Nancy and the others know what that one person is, you affect the entire town, because maybe there's one particular person's secrets, something that was buried deep that you're trying to get revealed. Because this also affects memories that were altered in some shape or form. So it does seem like there is a supernatural element to the guy in particular that they were questioning, and and him, Magpie, because her name's like Margaret, right? Her and Judge Abbott, plus that dude, all of their memories had been altered. At least Judge Abbott didn't remember this until he started drinking the water and he started panicking, because So that's why I'm wondering, like, was it meant to be for everyone, or was it for an isolated person just covering their tracks? Or maybe it is about, yes, someone is tired of this town's secrets and what that might unveil, especially later when Abbott's like, if you pull this thread, you don't know what you're going to unleash, which is like, what does that mean exactly? Like I said, like, I guess it's not just going to be his secrets that are brought to the surface, everyone's secrets. Maybe, or maybe this was specifically the reason why because it's like, oh, Abbott got poisoned. It's like, well, we know that the water's affecting everyone. Like I said, it's just maybe because of the way the water works and the goo in it, it's affecting people in a way where it's like I said, no one's going to like, because Abbott's the first one that the team's aware of, but there might have been other incidents that, once again, it's just like, hey, this person's been acting a little differently lately behavior-wise, but it's not enough to kind of draw attention. Only reason why this happened with Abbott, because obviously George was there, but also he's older and almost had a heart attack from it. So we'll have to wait to see, because it definitely is in the water supply, so there's no way it could have just been so isolated like that. But it's like, I guess everyone's been drinking water that hasn't really been fully contaminated. Either they've been drinking water that's like, hey, already bottled and stuff, and no one's gotten anything from like the tap. Maybe that's the justification for it. We'll ultimately have to wait and see, like, why no one in this team has been affected before now. I mean, it just happened. I mean, I'm assuming timeline-wise, it's definitely been like, that was like yesterday maybe, or, yeah, I'd assume like that was like just yesterday or something, so. But like I said, I like both sides of that, because it's all obviously connected. Nancy's circumstances and Abbott's circumstances, along with the dude that was involved with the Margaret situation, that it's all tied together. Because especially when Ace was kind of rejecting Nancy to a certain extent, what did she do? She flipped out and tried to bash his head in with a statue. It's like, for her, she was almost like, I feel like I'm almost feeling everything that Home Dude was feeling. Because it turns out he attacked Margaret all those years ago because she rejected him. It's like, I guess that's why he broke into her house in the first place. Because even Margaret tried to be like, oh, like, it was just a boy crush. Yeah, he broke into my house, but no big deal. Nothing came of it. But it's like, yeah, it did. And she just doesn't remember. Nancy and George end up revealing the truth to her. It's like, right, we don't have the evidence to prove what exactly happened to you, but this is what happened, and we thought you had a right to know. Because she had been blaming herself all these years, thinking like, oh yeah, it was my fault, when in actuality, you were attacked. And then Judge Abbott covered up for the attack. You know, that boys will be boys type of thing of like, he broke into her house, you did that, but because you let him go, he went back, stalked her, and attacked her. He almost killed her. And he was allowed to get away with it all these years. And yes, his memories are altered. He has daughters of his own now. And that's why on some level, he's very like, hey, works out a lot. And it's very like, he knows how toxic some dudes can be. And so he wants to be bigger and stronger so that if any dudes mess with his daughters, that he could easily take anyone down. So it's like, on some subconscious level, it's still there, that guilt and shame about all of it, and it's even though he doesn't remember it, it still manifested itself as a part of himself, of like, yo, I gotta be big and strong to protect my daughters from like, yeah, I know guys can be toxic out there, but it's like, why do I know that? It's like, because I was that guy, and I regret it, and I don't want my daughters to ever meet a guy that was like I was, so. And obviously how this affects George too, because George, like, she wanted to thank Abbott. It's like, yes, he was harsh on me, but the fact of the matter is, I know it's because he cares. He sees potential in me, all the stuff that Carson told her last episode, and he gave me a chance. I'm not even in law school, and he allowed me to become a clerk. I want to be able to tell him how much I appreciate that. And so it's like, right, you meant a lot to me. You're an inspiration. But now it's like, wait, I find out you did this despicable thing, and you did it because you were in a situation. What was it, like an election type of thing of he was trying to keep his, like, his numbers good or whatever. It's just his own perception. Like, he just wanted, like, the perception of him to be good. So to keep up, like, his own perception of, like, who he is and what he represents and stuff like that, he buried this situation. Once again, that guy's been able to walk free for, like, decades because of it. And he was able to go away free despite everything he did. Because whatever it is that's affecting all of this, affecting them in the regards of like altered memories and altered stuff, it's allocated to just Horseshoe Bay, because the photos of her wounds at another place, was it Bangor is what they said, the wounds were consistent with the horse in those pictures, but the Horseshoe Bay photos, And also the fact is, it was like these horse statues, Horseshoe Bay and everything. It feels like it's got to be, like, there's got to be something there. I'd assume because the glasses are going to be so probably like prominent in this season, or at least like just constantly, if not in the forefront, at least in the background in some shape or form between them and his their son, that maybe they have some part to play in all of this. I have no idea. Because their son talked about it with Nancy, that he's like, yeah, I have no interest in what my parents do. Because it's like, wait, what? He's like, well, what do my parents do? Like, that you're kind of not cool with them. And it's like, so I was about to say how much of that is true and how much is him lying. He did bring it up to Nancy later on. It's like, yeah, I was adopted too. So I'm wondering, is that going to turn into a prominent storyline in some shape or form? Because Nancy, to get the machine, needed to like suck out all the bro Nancy in her, that she ended up having to give him her necklace as collateral. Obviously, he's like, the locket's my mom. The compass piece on the inside is from my biological mom. It's all I have left of her. So, and he's like, yeah, I get it. I'm adopted too. So I'm especially because it's in this awkward situation where it's like, you can tell he kind of likes Nancy, but Nancy's just kind of like, yeah, cool, thanks. But it's like, yeah, because the whole her and Ace situation is complicated. I kind of feel suspicious that it's like, right, he had that locket for a while. Maybe he did something, maybe he didn't. But it's also like, I'm kind of getting kind of a bit of a suspicious vibe, but we'll see how that turns out. Because obviously, like, this situation is kind of resolved. They found out the truth, but they've only scratched the surface on the truth. Once again, we don't know how Abbott, Margaret, and Home Dude's memories got, like, changed. Like, did he go to someone to cast, like, some supernatural spell to alter reality and memories in that regard, or what? Because this was also back in 96. I'm like, would you really have had the capabilities to really alter a photo like that? Like, I wouldn't expect him to have the know-how, but maybe he went to someone who was able to change it. But that's where it definitely feels like, well, you're already altering memories, so it might just be a like magical thing that ended up altering all forms of memories associated with this reality, and those memories including photos, because photos are kind of captured memories, to, you know, in a sense. So maybe that's how it works. But once again, it's only allocated to Horseshoe Bay, because anything outside of that wasn't affected by whatever changed everything. Because even Home Dude was like, yeah, I'm not the one that changed the photo. That was Abbott. So he had to have gone to somebody at the time to change that. So we did kind of get to the heart of everything about why Nancy's condition like manifested the way it did. Because once again, it's like, hey, I'm burying everything deep down, like all my feelings, I know they're there, but they're kind of locked away, and all I can do is feel this anger. So it's like when Ace said no, that rejection kind of sent her flying off, because it's like, right, it's the same thing as someone who's raised with like, yeah, don't talk about your feelings, like bury that stuff, like give into, like, you got to be manly, masculine. It's like, right, Nancy kind of had that version of things, which even Ace admitted later on, that he admits like, right, I wasn't looking at things from your perspective about like why. I just wanted my answers. And she had called him out for it, but she was bro Nancy at the time. But it was some truth of like, right, you want things to kind of work your way. You want the answers when you want them, and he admits and recognizes like, right, I was frustrated and I was angry about not being able to hear what I wanted to hear. But even Nancy's like, yeah, I tried to kill you, bash your head in with a horse statue, so I think we're kind of call it even. But she finally admits to him everything that she had been hiding from him about the time they spent together. And it's like, right, we can hopefully work together to find a way forward. And Nancy's hopeful for that too. And so she ends up telling him everything from that time her and Ace were together, like what those days were like. So it's kind of nice to see, like, right, like once again, they were both driven by their own frustration and fear and anger in this regard. So we have that. We have the whole situation with Nick kind of going back out there on dating. So he ends up going on a date with someone named Jade. And Jade is kind of a PR person. And even I thought it was kind of weird where it's like they were very, I can help you with this and that. And it's like, is this actually a date, or is this like, or are you working right now? Because they were like spinning things for Nick in a very like, I can help you capitalize on you kind of being trendy, because he's not the social media dude, which is understandable because he didn't have a normal teenage year, because obviously he went to jail and everything, so he didn't have like a normal teenage upbringing, and so he's never. I think because of like his circumstances, he's always stayed away from social media, regardless. So I think that added to it's like, yeah, you're a modern day teenager, so of course you know about social media, but it's like you had extra reason to stay away from social media, considering your circumstances were kind of like probably online and stuff. So. But he's kind of just getting back on social media. I even love Bess being like, yeah, it's the first time you've dated really since high school. And it's not someone that you've kind of slept with before or in a friend circle. And it's like, oh yeah, he's like, yeah, that is kind of the case, isn't it? It's like, yeah, that's kind of been, the Nancy and George of it all. So it's like, yeah, so kind of stepping outside of that. So it's like, all right, this is my first time kind of going on dates since then, because it's never really been like it's always been an easier transition because it's like hey, me and Nancy, and then like, hey, me and George, because it's still like, it's not like you had to go through the more traditional dating route of kind of like, hey, I know nothing about you. It's like, I've known you, and then something happens between us. So either way, so I thought that was kind of interesting. And luckily, it seems like Nick and Jade are kind of working back, because for Jade, it's like, hey, I start talking about PR, start talking about work when I get nervous. So it does seem like things are going to kind of, work out in the end. So, I mean, we'll see. But it's like, because for Nick, it's like, yeah, I just want to have a conversation with them. I just want to get to know them, because that's a process that's always been expedited a little bit with his past relationships, as we've seen over the course of the show. So, but other than that, we also had Bess, who's dealing with like, hey, meeting Abby's parents, and you could tell there was something off where it seemed like Abby didn't want Bess to meet her parents, and especially because she's like, oh, they're like this, they probably wouldn't like that food, and it's just like, oh. How about this? It's like, well, how about not something so fried? It's just like, how about just like fork and knife salmon? And Bess is working overtime to try and like impress Addie. And it's like, right, I want to make the best impression with your parents because my parents won't be there ever. So this kind of means a lot to me because you mean a lot to me. And it turns out Addie was kind of just worried about, hey, I don't want you to meet my parents because my parents are so involved. Now, what that fully means, she says, like, right, they'll call you, they'll kind of text you. It's like, I guess it's like my parents can be a little overbearing. They want to be all up in my life. Like when it's someone I'm dating, they want to be all in. So it's almost like when you're in a relationship with me, you're also in a relationship with my parents. But Bess is like, I'm not going to be scared off that easily. But I'm so curious because like I said, she's like, they'll text you all the time. So it's like, they'll really bring you into the family, which can be a good thing. But I think all at once that could be so overbearing, so she was scared about. And so also she did say like, right, they'll judge you, so it's not all good. So I was just wondering like some very specifics, but she's like, right, they'll like be all up in your. I guess for her, Abby's like, they've always been in my business regardless, and they've been so like judging and all up in always wanting things kind of their way, and what that kind of means for her. So that's why she's scared to like make Bess meet her parents. But it's like, hey, we're gonna figure this out. So we do get a little bit of it in the episode where like Bess is just her normal self and just like meets her parents and hugs them. So it's definitely gonna be interesting to see what kind of happens on that front. Whether that becomes like a major plot point or whether that's just kind of like part of Abby and like Bess's story, we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But it's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.